Hello everyone, I'm John from Kraft Music, and we're here today with a quick look at a fairly unique piece. It's the Manikin Electronic Memotron M2K. For a great deal on the Memotron, please check out our bundles at craftmusic.com. Memotron is a sample playback instrument whose sole purpose is to look, act, and most importantly sound as much as possible like a polyphonic tape replay keyboard, like a Mellotron or a Chamberlin, without the hassle and expense of procuring and maintaining one of those vintage instruments along with its fragile tape frame sound libraries. No small amount of care and attention to detail has gone into making not just Memotron's sample playback engine, but also its layout and controls as authentic as possible so that seasoned players can have a familiar sound and setup, and so that somebody like me, who's never even been in the same room with an actual Mellotron, can have as authentic an experience as possible. Memotron has a 37-note synth action keyboard running from F to F to mimic a Mellotron's typical note range from F3 to F6, and also mimics its basic performance controls, which consist of a master volume knob, a tone control, which is implemented here as a passive 12 dB low-pass filter, and a pitch control, which has a range of plus or minus 3 halftones. When you play notes on Memotron, there's a very brief and subtle sort of ramping up of playback speed that happens at the very beginning of the sample, presumably to mimic the tape being engaged on one of the vintage instruments. A little bit of wow and flutter applied during sample playback, and a maximum sustained duration of 8 seconds, which brings us to one of Memotron's other playback controls, the half-speed switch. Besides having the obvious effect of lowering pitch by about an octave, engaging the half-speed switch will also double the sustained duration to about 16 seconds, and will even introduce a subtle audio degradation, especially at higher frequency ranges. And much like the sample startup time that I mentioned a moment ago, turning the half-speed switch on and off, the effect isn't instantaneous. There's actually, once again, a very brief sort of tape speed change sound that you can hear as I turn the half-speed switch on and off. Here next to the half-speed switch is the ABC sound selection and blending control, which is meant to mimic the shifting of tape heads across different tapes within a frame. There are slight detents at the absolute A, B, and C positions, and then continuous blending to let you blend sounds continuously between A and B or B and C, which lets you dial in the exact balance you want between two sounds, or even lets you do dramatic sweeps during a performance. Memotron has this nice white on blue LCD screen and does have some menus for getting at its parameters, but the menu system isn't intimidatingly deep or complex, and navigating it is actually really similar to using one of the old scroll wheel iPods, where you turn and click this data knob here to select and set different parameters, and then use this escape button here to cancel out of operations or back up one level in the menu structure. In the menus, we can first and foremost set which 3 sounds are assigned to the A, B, and C positions. And beyond that, set how they behave, with the option to have sounds not be affected by the A, B, C mix knob and just play continuously. There are also options to restrict certain sounds to a certain range of notes on the keyboard in case you want to have a sound that only plays when you're within a certain range. And beyond that, some basic parameters too for things like master volume, which is set ahead of whatever you do with the ABC mix knob and the master volume control. Some basic envelope parameters for attack and release per sound, and panning controls across the stereo field, and velocity sensitivity for each sound as well. In the second top-level menu, we find Memotron's effects settings, and the first effects block contains a dozen amp models that you can apply. The second effects block is for delays and modulation effects like chorus, flanger, phase, and tremolo. Within the mod delay section, we've got an additional page of parameters as well, with options for things like rate and depth of chorus, as well as delay time and feedback. I should point out here, too, that you have to choose one option in each of these effects sections. Not that it's a huge limitation, but you can't, for example, stack up amp models or run a chorused sound through a delay. You just get to pick one option in each section. In the third and final effects block, there are 18 reverb algorithms, including the options you'd expect with some room types, as well as halls, some plate reverbs, and then also in the reverb section, there are some echo settings, which are different from the delay settings that we saw in the mod delay section, including some options for mono and stereo echoes, as well as echoes that happen in 3/4 and 4/4 time. The next top-level menu has some basic settings for MIDI, including transmit and receive channels, as well as the option to turn local control on and off. And this is a good place to mention, too, that Memotron has a decent MIDI implementation, albeit one that's geared more toward performance than automation. So while there aren't MIDI CC assignments for deeper parameters like delay feedback or selecting amp models, there are CC assignments for all of Memotron's physical controls, with the mod wheel assigned by default to the ABC sound blending knob. So if you've got a favorite master controller keyboard that you'd rather use in lieu of the built-in keybed, Manikin has made it pretty easy to extend Memotron's physical controls and assign them to your mod wheel and any assignable knobs you might have on your controller. Next up is a menu section to address Memotron's internal memory, which is strictly for the storing of sounds. It has a generous amount of internal memory, and additional sounds from a wide variety of expansion libraries that Manikin sells are loaded into the internal memory via an SD card slot on the back. Speaking of SD cards, Manikin does give you one in the box, and you'll probably want to leave it or leave an SD card loaded into Memotron all the time, because in addition to being used to shuttle sounds into and out of the internal memory, you can also store your user-defined frames on an SD card. Frames take their name from the large tape frames that you would swap into the vintage instruments to change sound sets, and frames on the Memotron are defined as a complete set of settings, which includes your assignments for sound positions A, B, and C, and any associated sound parameters, as well as effect settings. You can also define and save a default frame, which will be loaded on startup, whether that's your favorite set of sounds or just an empty frame ready to be populated. In addition to the SD card slot, we also find on the back panel 1/4-inch left and right outputs, stereo headphone out, MIDI in, out, and through jacks, and an expression pedal input for control over master volume. There's also a knob back here to adjust the LCD display contrast. Memotron is housed in a robust metal case with this glossy white finish and strikes a decent balance between feeling solid and sturdy while still being nice and portable, which is, after all, one of its primary advantages over the bulky vintage instruments it's emulating. So that's the Manikin Electronic Memotron M2K, a great option that provides the experience of playing one of these vintage electromechanical tape-based keyboards with all of its idiosyncrasies and with access to a much wider variety of sounds than all but the most dedicated and well-heeled Mellotron collector. Be sure to check out our bundles, including a nice option with a carry bag to transport or store Memotron at craftmusic.com. Once again, my name is John. Thanks for watching.